So Gilbert and Chandler, which one's more expensive and which one is the more competitive market? Now, at first glance, when you look at a balance of supply and demand, Chandler is technically the more competitive market. And when you look at the median sales price, Gilbert is a little bit higher. But when you start pulling back the layers, you realize there's a lot more going on. So today we're going to actually break down these two markets, do a quick comparison, and ultimately give you some insight on if you're looking at a certain type of home, which market should you go to, and also what strategies for buying a home is going to be the most helpful for you to win as we leave 2025 and enter 2026. I'm Courtney Strelzik. I'm actually a real estate agent here in the Phoenix East Valley. And I created this channel to really be a guide. Maybe you've moved here a few years ago, or you're planning on moving here and you're trying to figure out what part of the East Valley is right for you, where you should live. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button because you may never see me again if you want this information. So when I said a moment ago that Chandler is technically the more competitive market, it's really not by that much. And we can see this by looking at the market index. This is when we look at the balance of supply and demand. And when we rank all the cities in the Phoenix metro area, Gilbert and Chandler overall are definitely one of the more competitive cities. Chandler ranked number 4 and Gilbert ranked number 5. Now, technically, both of these cities are going to be sellers markets, meaning the seller has somewhat of the upper hand. It's a more competitive market. But this is the thing. When we look at the market index, which is the number that determines what kind of market we're in, we can see that we're like barely in a seller's market. Anything above 110 is considered a seller's market. So it really is pretty close to a neutral market, both Chandler and Gilbert. So let's say it's a condo that's outdated. There's 5 other condos just like it for sale on the market in the same complex. The buyer is more likely going to have the upper hand when negotiating for that home. But on the other hand, let's say you have a single family home, it's completely move-in ready, super clean, has a gorgeous backyard with a pool, and it's priced appropriately. It's very likely the seller is going to have more of the upper hand in either Chandler or Gilbert. Ultimately, it really comes down to the type of home, how clean it is. That's a huge thing, how well kept it is. And most importantly, how well priced it is. The market today is very, very sensitive to pricing. So if a home's, just ever so slightly under market value, you're going to get a lot of interest in it and the sellers are going to have more of the upper hand. So I would say across the board, Chandler and Gilbert, as far as the level of competition, they're pretty neck and neck with one another. And this is something somewhat unique to our market today because historically Chandler was by far the most competitive market in Phoenix Metro. So things have changed a little bit. So which city is more expensive? A moment ago, I did mention that Gilbert does have the higher median sales price. Last month, the median sales price was $560,000 for Gilbert, and then Chandler was $530,000. But another metric, if we look at the average price per square foot, Chandler is actually higher than Gilbert. So why are these numbers somewhat contradicting one another? Well, it ultimately comes down to the type of home and location within each of these cities, which I'm going to break down. So the first thing we have to consider, what type of homes are in each of these cities? So when we look at Chandler, we can see there's a lot more options for condos and townhomes, and in general, a lot more options for homes under, that $400,000 mark, so more starter type homes. And even if we look at just single family homes under $550,000, we're going to see slightly more options in Chandler. And just as a side note for those more starter single family homes, in Gilbert, you're going to have newer construction, but it's going to be more likely on a smaller lot, where in Chandler, you're going to get somewhat of an older home, maybe a home that needs a little bit more work, but you might have more of a proper sized yard. This isn't a hard, fast rule. It's more of a rule of thumb. Let's say, you aren't looking for a starter home, but you aren't looking for a luxury home for it. Let's say price from $600,000 to $1.5 million. When we're looking at this price range, Chandler is technically a little bit more expensive with Gilbert, but it really comes back to, again, location in Chandler. If you're more on the east side of Chandler, the pricing is going to feel very comparable to Gilbert. You aren't going to see or notice a lot of big discrepancies. But if you're further on the west side, particularly more of the northwest side, and you have good access to one of the major highways, these are the areas where homes are notably more expensive than Gilbert. At the end of the day, location location is everything. And if, just as a rule of thumb, the more central you are in the Phoenix metro area, it does get a little bit more expensive. What about more of those luxury listings, homes priced over 1.5 million? When we look and compare between the cities, they are pretty comparable. But again, very similar to the homes priced under 1.5 million. If you have the same exact house in Gilbert, and then in that northwest part of Chandler, that area is going to be a little bit more expensive. The one caveat I would point out between Gilbert and Chandler is a lot of the luxury listings or homes in Gilbert are slightly newer. And in Chandler, you will find once in a while, it's like a very beautiful plot of land. The floor plan's great, but it might have some 90s interior. It needs a little TLC to really bring it back to life. So considering this can impact the price per square foot metric when comparing both of these cities too. And another thing to note as well is Gilbert does have quite a bit more luxury listings, particularly in the past handful of years. But the one thing to consider is because Gilbert has a little bit more inventory, the competition isn't going to be quite as much as it is in Chandler at this price point. And as far as, considerations for winning in today's market when you're buying a home, and this really applies to Gilbert and Chandler, this is something to keep in mind. If there's a home that's move-in ready, it's clean, has a great backyard, decent size, privacy pool, all that stuff, those homes, if they're priced appropriately, they're still moving quickly. The sellers are probably going to have somewhat of the upper hand. However, if you spot a home that's been sitting on the market for a fair amount of time, let's say over 90 days, and maybe it was originally overpriced and they had to do a couple price reductions, you might be able to negotiate a pretty good deal if you can find the right motivated seller. And the other thing in today's market is we're still seeing a lot of sellers actually pay for buyers' closing costs or some sort of rate buy down to lower your monthly mortgage rate. Now, of course, there's multiple ways to skin the cat or get the best deal. I actually made this video here talking about really how to get the best deal in today's market and how to avoid common pitfalls or a common trap that people often find themselves in. Thank you so much for your time and subscribe. I'll keep you up to date, I promise.